Alright, welcome to my mid-season predictions video. This is going to be a video dedicated to adjusting my predictions that I made a few months ago, just before the 2025 season started for the NFL. So if you want to go see what my predictions were at that time, that video is on my channel. I'll also have it linked in a card up above here in the video. But you know, you can go to that video if you want to see what my preseason predictions were. This video is going to be where I've done this the last couple seasons. I give myself a chance to, at the midseason, make amendments to my predictions for the season going into the second half, being that we've already had a half of a season to work with to get a look at some of the teams, and especially been able to see some of the major injuries that have happened to certain teams, and then also some standout players and things that can be really hard to predict before the season starts. Now, through doing this over the last few years, I've found that sometimes, even after making those mid-season predictions, sometimes the preseason predictions still end up being more accurate than the mid-season ones. Now, I have found that my week-to-week predictions, I do that as well, and you can subscribe if you are interested in getting more of my week-to-week fillings on specific games, but this is my, a little bit more of a look-ahead type thing, and I will include not only full standings, but also a playoff prediction as well. And, with these predictions, I do, I'll show it for you here on the screen. Not the most visually appealing, but a spreadsheet that shows every single game that I have mapped out in the entire NFL season, and you'll be able to see on the left half of the spreadsheet for the games that have already happened. You'll see a lot of those cells are in either a light blue, a purple pink color, yellow, and orange. So what each of those means is blue means that I had predicted that game to be a win for that team, and I was correct. Yellow means that I had predicted a win, or I had predicted a loss, and I was correct. And then the purple-pink color is I had predicted a win, and I was wrong, so that team lost. And then orange is I had predicted a loss, and I was wrong, and they proved me wrong, and they won the game. And then, of course, you will see the one game where we did have a tie this year, the Packers and the Cowboys. I did have to add 2 shades of gray to this spreadsheet. The light gray for Dallas indicates that I was predicting them to lose, and then the Packers, I had been predicting them to win the game, so they get a darker shade of gray because the tie, in my opinion, is more detrimental to where I had thought they were going to be going into the season. Now, that right side of the spreadsheet, you'll see all those games, green or red. Pretty simple. Green are games that I've got predicted as the team is going to win it. Red are the games that I predict each team is going to lose. So you can pause the video if you'd like. You can see for every single team their exact schedule, including bye weeks. You can see exactly which games I predict each team to win going forward, which will give you the results that I'm going to show you going forward as far as the standings and my playoff predictions. So again, you can pause the video, take a look at that as long as you'd like, but let's move on into the results for my predictions going throughout the rest of this season. So to start, we'll look at the NFC North. So for the NFC North, I do have the Detroit Lions winning the division with a record of 12-5. That ends up giving them a second seed in the NFC playoff picture. And then for the rest of the NFC North, we have the Green Bay Packers at 10-6-1, barely getting into the playoffs, just barely edging out the Chicago Bears. So unfortunate for me and fellow Bears fans, I do unfortunately have the Bears just barely missing the playoffs. So obviously these predictions I have, not necessarily what I want to happen. These are just my predictions based off of what I believe is going to happen. Of course, coming into the season, I did not expect the Bears to make the playoffs, and that still, my expectation there hasn't changed much. As a matter of fact, for all of the teams in the NFC or in the NFL this season so far, the Bears are the team that I actually have predicted their games the most accurately so far. I've only been wrong on one game so far this season, that game being the game against the Bengals. I had predicted the Bears to lose that before the season started because I had assumed that Joe Burrow was going to start. I had assumed the Bengals defense was going to be slightly better than it is. So I had seen that as being a tough matchup for the Bears. So I had given them the loss there. So I've only been wrong on one single game for the Bears so far this season. Now I do expect to end up being wrong on at least a couple more this season, but who knows? Again, I've obviously so far I've been pretty accurate on the Bears. So unfortunately for me, if my predictions and feelings about the rest of their schedule come true, I will unfortunately have to watch the Bears yet again, as I've had to do many times as a Bears fan, see the Bears miss the playoffs. But not only that, this year would be one of those times where they miss it, but only just barely miss it. And again, in this case, it would really be by less than half of a game by half of a game because of the tie that the Packers have with the Cowboys, putting them at 10-6-1. Maybe if the Packers end up losing that game against the Cowboys, then I would have them at 10-7 along with the Bears, and then it would come down to in division and head-to-head tiebreakers and that sort of thing. But so there would still be a chance that the Packers would still win a tiebreaker, maybe. But yeah, that tie may end up playing a factor in the Packers' chances at the playoffs. And, for the Bears, for teams that are just behind them, could also still just barely get the Packers ahead of some of these teams. And then, of course, rounding out the end of the NFC North, I do have the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, they've had a bit of a disappointing season so far. J.J. McCarthy, a bit disappointing so far. And so 9-8, I do think they'll do okay towards the second half of the season. They've got some winnable games. They do have some tough games in there as well. I do think they've got a good coach and a good roster. But, yeah, I don't see the Vikings doing enough throughout the end of the season to make the playoffs, and I see them being the last team in the NFC North. Moving on to the AFC North, I have the Baltimore Ravens just barely winning the division, tied in record with the Pittsburgh Steelers, both teams finishing with a record of 9-8. So obviously for the Steelers, that's going to sound very appropriate. They're always right around 500, and I do expect that to be the case for the Steelers and for the Ravens this year. Now, just based off of tiebreakers, based off of the games I've predicted, I do have the Ravens actually winning the division, and that would end up giving the Ravens the 4th seed here, and that would end up putting the Steelers outside of the playoffs. So, tough luck for the Steelers if that were to be the case. But, in a division with that low of wins at the top, I see that as being a very possible outcome there. So, Ravens, Steelers, 9-8. Again, the tiebreakers, that certainly is such a small deal that I could be wrong. This could be flipped. But, I'm also just a little bit more confident. If either of these two teams is going to outperform 9-8, it's going to be the Ravens. They do feel like they've gotten hot the last few weeks. I think they've got a much better chance. The Steelers have been looking, again, typical Steelers, win one week, lose another week. But their offense has looked pretty stagnant. At other times of the season, their defense has looked pretty disappointing. So, and then rounding out the rest of the division, Bengals 7-10, Browns 4-13. Not much surprises there. I mean, the Bengals, I don't think it matters. There's been reporting of Joe Burrow being ahead of schedule to return for the Bengals, but I don't think it really is going to matter. Their defense is so bad, and even with Joe Flacco, they've been putting up a ton of points, and it hasn't mattered. They've still been losing games. So I don't really think that Joe Burrow coming back is going to make enough of a difference. And at this point, the Bengals have put themselves in such a big hole anyways. I certainly don't see the Bengals making the playoffs. I think Next Gen Stats has them at like a 22%, if I remember right. So obviously not likely just based off of that. I mean, the Bengals would pretty much at this point have to win out. And I just don't see them doing it. I do see them having a good second half to the season. But you've got some tough games. You got some in-division games. You got games against the Patriots, the Bills, so I just don't see the Bengals doing enough to get into the playoffs, and I don't even see them doing enough to being able to get back to 500 as well. So moving on now to the NFC East, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. I have the Eagles winning the division with a record of 14-3, tied for the best record in the league if my predictions become true, and they would win the first seed in the NFC. And then for the rest of the NFC East, I have the Dallas Cowboys at 6-10-1, the Washington Commanders at 4-13-0, and then the New York Giants at 4-13 as well. So bottom of the NFC East, I've got both the Commanders and Giants. They're both at the same record. I don't necessarily have leanings too much either way on, who will really be at the bottom there if they have a tiebreaker. I didn't necessarily go through the work of checking that, to be honest. I'm not too concerned. I'm not predicting draft order here, but yeah, either way, Commanders, Giants, I've got both finishing at 4-13. And then moving on to the AFC East, we have the other number one seed in the playoffs, that being the New England Patriots. I have the New England Patriots finishing with a record of 14-3, same record as the Eagles, and also getting the one seed in their respective division. For the rest of the AFC East, I then have the Buffalo Bills at 11-6, and then the other two teams, Dolphins and the Jets, finishing at 4-13. Kind of interesting how similar I had these predictions for both of the East divisions. Didn't really do that intentionally at all. And again, I went through every single game, predicted what I think is going to happen in every single individual game, and these are the numbers we came out with. So pretty funny that that's how things worked out if these were to come true. But yeah, I mean, the Patriots, they're hot. They've got, they've already got a ton of wins under their belt. I think as far as playoff probability, according to Next Gen Stats, I think they're near the top of the league as far as likely to make the playoffs. And also based off the wins they've got so far, including one against the Bills, they've got pretty good command over the AFC East as it stands currently. And the Bills, obviously, if they win out, for example, they could maybe win the division, but that's pretty much what they would have to do is win out, and I don't think this Bills team is going to win out for the second half of the season. I do still see the Bills making the playoffs, as you can see here. I do have the Bills making the playoffs at 11-6, but only just. I think that is 11-6 by my predictions is only just barely going to get you into the AFC playoffs here. So Bills end up all the way down at the 7th seed with that 11-6 record. And then, of course, again, the other two teams completely missing the playoffs. Moving on to the next division, for the NFC South at the top of it, I have the Buccaneers at 11-6. They end up getting the 4th seed in the NFC playoff picture, and then the other teams in the NFC South all miss the playoffs. Falcons at 8-9, the Panthers at 7-10. To their credit, they have done better than I predicted coming into this season. They're I've got them finishing 7-10. When the season started, I had predicted them to finish 3-14. So they've improved on that by 4 already. With wins against teams like the Packers, for example. So, credit to them. Not enough to get them to a 500, but I do think they get to 7-10, which is certainly an improvement on where Carolina has been this last few seasons. And then rounding out the division, Saints 3-14. Not much change there from how I felt about them coming into the season. They've pretty much proven my feelings right. I mean, not that anybody was really disagreeing with me on that. I think all of us pretty well agreed that there was not much hope coming into the season for the Saints at all. Moving over to the AFC South, we have the Indianapolis Colts winning the division, and I do have them finishing with a record of 13-4. Just barely getting edged out by the Patriots for that first seed and the first round bye. I don't think the Colts are going to end up getting that. They end up with the second seed in the AFC, do win their division, do have a very surprising, impressive dark horse season. And again, especially credit to Jonathan Taylor. A lot of players on their roster, the coaching staff. I think they got a lot of good pieces. And even Daniel Jones, bringing him in. For the most part this season, he's played better than you might expect. But the Colts have also played a relatively easy schedule the first half of this season. So I do still have the Colts winning most of the rest of their games coming up this season. The only ones that I have them losing coming up are against the Chiefs and the Seahawks, both on the road. And we have seen in the last 2 weeks a couple games of Daniel Jones going back to a little bit of pumpkin mode, turning over the ball 7 times, I believe it is, in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So not great there, but the Colts have still been able to, for the most part, overcome that. And again, outside of those games, Daniel Jones has played really well this year. So again, I think the Colts get into the playoffs, they win their division, get the second seed, but I think the Patriots are performing much better right now and winning much better to where I believe they're going to get more wins by the end of the season, and they'll have the better seed. And then for the rest of the AFC South, all teams that I think are going to miss the playoffs, Jags at 8-9, Texans at 7-10, and then the Titans near the bottom of the league. And then the Titans, bottom of the league for me as far as predictions. I have them finishing at 2-15. Coming into the season, I figured it was going to be the Saints or the Titans or somebody like that. And yeah, based off where we sit midway through the season, I do think just barely it's going to be the Titans that are worse than the Saints, but both of those two really bad. Definitely the worst 2 teams in the league. Followed not too far behind by, Raiders, Browns, Jets, some of those other teams. But let's move on to the next division I have, that being the NFC West. So for the NFC West, I have the other team that I have going 14-3, that being the LA Rams. Now, based off of head-to-head record, being that the Rams and Eagles did play earlier this season. If you remember, that was the game in Philly where the Rams actually were up, or the Rams made a late game drive with the chance setting themselves up for what could have been a walk-off field goal win. Great drive by Matthew Stafford and by Sean McVay. They get down to enemy territory, get set up for what should have been a pretty good, semi-reliable range for a field goal in the NFL these days. And they kick the field goal. Philly blocks the kick, and not only blocks it, but runs the kick back for a touchdown and get a win, a crazy win in the final moments of the game. So Philly ended up winning that game, And I have Philadelphia and the Los Angeles Rams. I have both finishing with a record of 14-3. So because of that game earlier on in the season, that tiebreaker would have the Eagles winning the first seed in the NFC, getting that first round bye, and the Rams would get the second seed, and they will have to play in the wild card game in the playoffs. So, but still, regardless of that, really great record. I do have the Rams finishing 14-3, winning their division, only just one game ahead of the Seahawks, who I have finishing at 13-4. That would make them the wild card team with the best record in the NFL playoffs this season. 13-4. That's a pretty good record, certainly. Nothing to laugh at. This Seahawks team is for real, and as a matter of fact, we are coming up on here just tomorrow a game between the Rams and the Seahawks. As a matter of fact, we've got both of their games against each other coming up throughout this last half of the season. So those two games are going to be very important to the overall NFC playoff picture, and certainly for the NFC West. Next in the NFC West, I do have the San Francisco 49ers finishing with a record of 11-6. That would put them at the 6th seed, right behind the Seahawks. The 49ers, I know they've got a lot of injuries, but based off reporting, Brock Purdy is supposedly going to be coming back this week. Mac Jones has been playing pretty good for them, so I don't necessarily expect Brock Purdy coming back to be a huge bump in performance for the 49ers. But regardless of either those two at quarterback, and yes, there is a lot of injuries for the 49ers, like always seemingly. But the 49ers, even coming into the season, we knew they had a very winnable schedule as far as, last year's win percentage for their opponents. They came in with a pretty weak schedule, and just looking at the games they've got coming up, they've got the Cardinals, the Panthers, the Browns. Then the 49ers have a late bye week, one of the latest, tied for some of the latest bye weeks in the league in week 14. That's when the bye weeks are done for the year. So they have a late bye week, which can be pretty helpful, especially for a team like the 49ers, who are often so hurt. So again, Cardinals, Panthers, Browns. Then after the bye week, they have the Titans. Then they go on the road to the Colts. And then they're back at home for the Bears and the Seahawks. So a lot of winnable games in there and a bye week. So, regardless of injuries, regardless of necessarily which quarterback is playing week to week, I do think Brock Purdy is slightly better at quarterback, certainly. He has won the starting job for a reason, but I do think, Mac Jones has played well enough the last few weeks while Brock Purdy's been out for a while that there has certainly been plenty of discussion, at least around national sports talk, of, do the 49ers have a quarterback controversy now? Really the biggest thing that Brock Purdy might have going for him as far as stability there with a job with the 49ers is that they're paying him a little bit more. So, the owner, especially with this current GM and head coach and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, the owner at this point, they went from drafting Trey Lance to pretty quickly trading him away for almost nothing to then drafting Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft, deciding he was good enough, and early on signing him to his first contract, first non-rookie contract, to now then, soon after he gets hurt and you bring in Mac Jones and he looks just about as good on your team. So as far as money-wise, there might be a little bit of pressure to stick with Brock Purdy, being that you're kind of tied to him at least for the next few years based off how you paid him. So that might be one of the things that actually helps Brock Purdy's job stability in a way, oddly enough. But I mean, again, I do think he is a better quarterback than Mac Jones. If anything, the one thing that Mac Jones has over Brock Purdy, especially, including in these debates this last few weeks, is that Mac Jones seems to be the more durable quarterback. Certainly in games and even just in general as far as time missed. We've seen Mac Jones getting beat up a lot this last few weeks while he's been in, and he's managed to stay on the field. Whereas Brock Purdy, one of the concerns about him is injury concerns and his size, and we've seen it be a factor so far in his career, missing time in the short amount of time that he's been in the league. So, but regardless of who's playing quarterback for the 49ers, I think they get into the playoffs with the winnable schedule. They get the 6th seed in the NFC. And then rounding out the NFC West, of course, Arizona Cardinals at 5-12. I think it's very possible they fire their head coach at the end of the season, and I think we've maybe seen the last of Kyler Murray as the quarterback for the Cardinals. I think we may have seen the last of Kyler Murray there. And then the last division to look at with these predictions, the AFC West. Winning the AFC West by a tiebreaker, I have the Kansas City Chiefs surprising everybody at this point because they are not in the driver's seat right now. So it is going to be asking a lot for the Chiefs to do this. But I do have the Chiefs yet again, just barely this year, winning their division yet again with a record of 12-5. Now, record-wise, I do have them tied with the Denver Broncos at 12-5 there. But based off of in-division record, I believe that the Chiefs would end up winning this tiebreaker here. And so, yeah, they would end up winning the division. They would get the 3rd seed in the AFC. And the Broncos, also at 12-5, would be the top wild card team in the AFC at the 5th seed. And then for the LA Chargers, I have them finishing 11-6 and getting the 6th seed in the AFC. And so that rounds out my record predictions for each division. So I'll let you see here now. Let's take a look at the NFC Playoff Bracket and my predictions for it. So you'll be able to see them here on the screen. I do have, through the process of the playoffs, I have the NFC Championship game being the Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Los Angeles Rams for a revenge match of earlier this season. And I do think in this one, the Rams get the win. Sean McVay, Matt Stafford, assuming this team, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, all the other pieces they have, some of the young talent they have on defense, assuming they stay healthy, do the Rams. I have more faith in them than I do the Eagles, oddly enough. Just with the chaos of Philly, I just have a hard time trusting them to repeat going to the playoffs or going to the Super Bowl, even though this would be a game in Philly yet again. So, I certainly could see the Eagles making the Super Bowl still. I had predicted them to make the Super Bowl before the season started, but at where we sit right now, midway through the season, I do have the NFC Championship game being the 2-seed Rams going to Philly and upsetting the 1-seeded Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. That sends the Rams to the playoffs, or to the Super Bowl. And then out of the AFC, this is my playoff picture there, and you will see this is not exactly, again, these playoffs are not exactly what I want. They are what I believe would happen if these teams land where they are. And I do have the AFC Championship game being in New England with the first-seeded New England Patriots losing in a close one to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Boo this man!
They get another ticket to the Super Bowl. They go to the Super Bowl yet again. Again, I know people don't want to see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I don't necessarily want to see it again either. But just based off of where things are, I know people have doubts about the Chiefs still. But I think, between Patrick Mahomes having one of his better seasons in a few years, Travis Kelce, for his age, a bit of a resurgence compared to the last couple of weeks or last couple of years, and a lot of that for both of those two comes down to them having Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice back in the mix. They were missing both of those guys for quite a few weeks the beginning half of the season. Having them back in has made some very obvious improvements to that offense, including in the running game. That Chiefs defense, not quite as good as it has been the last 2 years or so, but it's still a pretty good defense. And so I just, again, with the championship pedigree and experience this team has, both on the coaching staff and on the roster, and just the continuity they have at all those positions, I see the Chiefs getting into the playoffs and getting some upsets here, including the AFC Championship game on the road in New England. And so my Super Bowl prediction as it stands now has changed quite a bit from what it was at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, my prediction was that the Philadelphia Eagles would face off against the Buffalo Bills, and in that prediction, I had the Bills getting the win 27-23, with Josh Allen being the MVP of the Super Bowl. Now, as things sit in the midseason, these are my results. Not what I want, but just what I believe would happen if this Super Bowl occurred. I have the Kansas City Chiefs just barely beating the Los Angeles Rams 26-23, and of course the MVP going to Patrick Mahomes. Super Bowl MVP for the regular season. Again, I'm not doing regular season MVP in this video, but Super Bowl. But both of those two awards, quite often these days, pretty much an automatic quarterback award, unfortunately. So that's why both in the preseason when I had Josh Allen winning it, and now midseason I have Patrick Mahomes winning it if the Chiefs win. It's, these days it's pretty much whichever Super Bowl team wins the game, chances are their quarterback gets MVP of the game. So, take that for what you will. I know people don't want to see the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl again and Patrick Mahomes winning a Super Bowl MVP again, but the Chiefs are, again, they've got an uphill climb to win their division, and they've got an uphill climb even to an extent to get into the playoffs. But I think this Chiefs team can do it. I've got them winning this week on the road against the Broncos. Again, I have a hard time betting against the Chiefs. Again, not necessarily that I'm a Chiefs fan or I want them to win all these games, but I'm also not necessarily a Chiefs hater. I don't hate the Chiefs as much as many people do. I do feel the Chiefs fatigue, similar to how we all felt fatigued of the Patriots. And of course, after 5 years in the desert, the Patriots are back in it seems. But yeah, so these were my predictions. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Who do you have making it to the Super Bowl this year? What teams do you think I was right on? What do you think I was wrong on? Let me know all that down below, and I will see you in the next video. Enjoy Week 11.